What if I told you that the next time someone says, divorce just got way harder in America, they might be telling you only half the story? Imagine sitting at your kitchen table at 2 a.m. The house is silent. The person you once promised forever to is asleep in the other room. Or maybe they've already moved out. You've been thinking about divorce for months, maybe years. And then you open your phone and see headlines screaming that lawmakers are trying to end easy divorce. Suddenly, your private heartbreak feels political. You start to wonder, is the door out quietly closing? Over the past few years, conversations about divorce laws in the United States have become louder, more emotional, and more confusing. Social media is full of bold claims. Some say no-fault divorce is under attack. Others say the system already unfairly punishes one side. And in the middle of all this noise are real people, people like you, trying to understand what's actually happening. So tonight we're going to slow it down. We're going to separate rumor from reality. And by the end of this video, you'll understand what's changing, what isn't, and why the future of divorce in America is more complicated than a simple yes or no. To understand where we're headed, we have to go back. Before the 1970s, getting divorced in America was nothing like it is today. In most states, you had to prove fault. That meant adultery, abuse, abandonment, something concrete, something ugly. Couples who simply grew apart? That wasn't enough. You needed evidence. You needed witnesses. You needed to air your private life in court. Then, in 1969, something shifted. Ronald Reagan, who was governor of California at the time, signed the nation's first no-fault divorce law. California became the pioneer of a system that allowed couples to dissolve a marriage without proving wrongdoing. The phrase irreconcilable differences entered the American vocabulary. It was revolutionary. Over the next decade, every state followed. No-fault divorce transformed marriage from a legally binding trap into something closer to a voluntary partnership. If it wasn't working, you could leave. For many, this was liberation. For others, it marked the beginning of instability. Fast forward to today. You've probably seen viral posts claiming that some states are trying to eliminate no-fault divorce altogether, that lawmakers want to make divorce harder, especially for women. So what's really happening? Here's the truth. As of now, no U.S. state has fully abolished no-fault divorce. Every state still allows it in some form. But, and this is important, there have been growing political conversations in certain regions about reforming or limiting it. In states like Texas and Louisiana, some lawmakers and advocacy groups have publicly questioned whether no-fault divorce has weakened families. Bills have been proposed to make waiting periods longer or to require additional counseling steps before a divorce can be finalized. None of these proposals have overturned no-fault divorce, but they signal something deeper, a cultural debate about what marriage should mean in 2026 and beyond. Now let's talk about what tougher really means. When people say divorce laws are getting tougher, they're often talking about one of three things: waiting periods, property division, or custody battles. First, waiting periods. In some states, you can file for divorce and finalize it within a few months if both parties agree. In others, there are mandatory waiting periods, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year, especially if children are involved. The idea is to give couples time to reconsider. Is that new? Not really. But in certain states, lawmakers have proposed extending these waiting periods, arguing that cooling off time could reduce impulsive decisions. Second, property division. America follows two primary systems: equitable distribution and community property. In community property states like California and Arizona, marital assets are typically split 50-50. In equitable distribution states, which make up the majority, courts divide assets based on what they consider fair, not necessarily equal. Some recent court cases and legislative tweaks have refined how retirement accounts, digital assets, and even cryptocurrency are divided. But again, this isn't a sweeping nationwide crackdown. It's evolution, not revolution. Then there's custody. If you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed a shift towards shared parenting. Courts increasingly favor joint custody arrangements when possible. The old assumption that children automatically belong primarily with one parent, usually the mother, is fading. Some states have strengthened presumptions in favor of 50-50 custody. Supporters argue this protects fathers' rights and benefits children. Critics worry it can overlook situations involving subtle forms of abuse or power imbalance. And this is where tension builds, because divorce law isn't just about paperwork, it's about power. It's about safety. It's about money. It's about who gets to start over with stability and who doesn't. There's also another layer people rarely discuss openly: financial pressure. Divorce has always been expensive. Attorney fees can climb into the tens of thousands of dollars. Court costs, mediation, financial experts, it adds up quickly. In recent years, inflation and rising legal fees have made divorce even more financially daunting. For someone already feeling emotionally broken, that price tag can feel like a wall. So when people say divorce is getting harder, sometimes what they mean is that it feels harder, economically, emotionally, socially. But here's a surprising twist. Statistically, divorce rates in the United States have actually declined over the past decade. Younger generations are marrying later. Some are choosing not to marry at all. The institution itself is shifting. That shift changes the political conversation. When fewer people marry, and those who do marry later and more cautiously, the urgency to reform divorce laws becomes symbolic. It becomes a cultural signal rather than a widespread legal overhaul. And yet, the emotional fear remains real. Picture a woman in a rural town, financially dependent on her spouse, hearing rumors that no-fault divorce might disappear. Even if the law hasn't changed, the uncertainty can feel terrifying. Picture a father who believes the custody system once sidelined him, now hopeful that reforms might give him equal standing. These aren't abstract debates, they are lived experiences. Let's talk about covenant marriages for a moment. In states like Louisiana, Arizona, and Arkansas, couples can voluntarily choose a covenant marriage. This type of marriage requires premarital counseling and limits grounds for divorce. It's stricter by design. But here's the key word: voluntary. You choose it up front. Most couples don't. So despite headlines, the majority of Americans still have access to standard no-fault divorce processes. Now let's address the deeper question. Why are some groups pushing to tighten divorce laws? For many, it's about family stability. They argue that easy divorce contributes to broken homes and economic hardship for children. They believe making divorce slightly harder could encourage reconciliation. For others, this argument feels dangerously naive. They point out that forcing unhappy or unsafe couples to stay together doesn't magically create healthy families. It can trap people in damaging situations. This is where the debate becomes emotional and deeply personal. Because divorce is rarely a simple choice. It's usually the last chapter of a long story. Years of quiet resentment, financial stress, betrayal, or sometimes just silence where love used to be. When lawmakers discuss tightening laws, they're talking about policy. But for the person filing paperwork, it's about survival. Here's another layer: alimony reform. In several states, there have been efforts to limit lifetime alimony payments. Courts are moving toward rehabilitative support, temporary payments designed to help a lower-earning spouse become self-sufficient. Supporters argue this reflects modern realities where both spouses often work. Critics argue it ignores sacrifices made by stay-at-home parents who paused careers for decades. Again, not necessarily tougher, but different. So are divorce laws in the U.S. getting tougher? In some states, procedures may become slightly longer. Some reforms may emphasize shared custody. Some proposals may seek to narrow no-fault provisions. But as of now, No sweeping national rollback has occurred. What we're really witnessing is a cultural tug of war over marriage itself. And here's something many people don't realize. Family law is primarily state law. There is no single federal divorce code. That means your experience in New York could look very different from someone's in Florida. That patchwork system creates confusion. It also creates flexibility. Now, I want you to pause for a second. If you're watching this because you're considering divorce, you might feel scared, maybe overwhelmed, maybe angry, maybe relieved. No legal reform can erase the emotional reality of ending a marriage. Laws can change timelines and procedures, but they can't change heartbreak. And here's the truth: many headlines won't tell you. The biggest barriers to divorce are rarely legal. They're emotional, financial, and social. Fear of starting over, fear of losing time with your children, fear of financial instability, fear of judgment. When we strip away the political noise, that's what remains. As we move further into 2026, debates will likely continue. Some states may experiment with modest reforms. Others may double down on shared parenting models. Advocacy groups on both sides will push their narratives, but the foundation of no-fault divorce remains intact across the United States. And that's important, because the ability to leave a marriage without proving wrongdoing changed millions of lives. It allowed people to escape quietly rather than publicly destroy each other in court. It reduced the need for dramatic accusations. It acknowledged that sometimes relationships end, not because someone committed a crime, but because something essential disappeared. Still, the conversation isn't over. Marriage is evolving. Gender roles are evolving. Economic pressures are evolving. It's natural that the legal framework around marriage will evolve too. The key is understanding the difference between political rhetoric and actual enacted law. So the next time you see a headline declaring that divorce just became impossible, take a breath. Look at your specific state's statutes. Consult a qualified attorney. Separate viral fear from verified fact. Because in America, divorce is not disappearing, it's adapting. And if you're in the middle of that storm right now, remember this: laws may shape the process, but they do not define your worth. They do not define your future. They do not define whether choosing peace over pain was the right decision. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away. Not because it's easy, but because staying has become impossible. The legal system can slow that walk. It can add paperwork. It can require signatures and waiting periods. But it cannot extinguish the human need for dignity and safety. So here's the final truth. Divorce laws in the U.S. have not suddenly slammed shut. No-fault divorce still exists in every state. Yes, debates are happening. Yes, some proposals aim to tighten procedures. But the sweeping crackdown many fear has not materialized. What we're witnessing is a nation re-examining marriage itself. And maybe that's the real story. Not that divorce is getting tougher, but that America is wrestling with what commitment, freedom, and family should look like in a rapidly changing world. If this video helped clear the fog, share it with someone who might need clarity tonight. Because when it comes to something as life-altering as divorce, you deserve facts, not fear. And whatever chapter you're in right now, know this: endings are painful, but they are also proof that you survived long enough to write a new beginning.